Bhagavatam.
Sorry, Prabhuji. You can start. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and also we heard about Parikshit Maharaj. So basically, how did he got this an opportunity to listen from Sukadeva Goswami? As we know that one, Sukadeva Goswami is son of Vyasa Maharshi, and he doesn't even stay at any door for a long time.
Correct.
So we learn that you might mostly say till the time you take a milk from cow. So in this case, then how Parikshit Maharaj got this opportunity to listen. And we understood about Parikshit Maharaj, that he's a first-class devotee of the Lord, and he always worked towards the welfare of the people.
Yes.
Then the Vyasa Maharshi actually, one day when he took a morning bath in the Saraswati river, then he was thinking about the welfare of the people. So through his capability, he can foresee the future, and the sort of things going to happen in Kali Yuga. It's when compared to that, it's not so good. So how these people will get an opportunity to pass through this one,
Progress spiritually.
Progress spiritually.
Yeah. Thank you. Any point anybody would like to add? Uday? Uday, would you like to add any point? Uday?
Hello, Sachin. I was not there last week. So,
okay, fine. No, okay. So in the last chapter, that was chapter number 4. So 2-3 key items actually have happened. So Shaunak Rishi got the answer for all the 6 questions that he had asked in chapter number 1. And in chapters 2 and 3, Suta Goswami had given answers to those 6 questions. And now chapter 4, at the start of chapter 4, Shaunak Rishi asks another set of questions. So it is one single question that he asks, but it has 6 sub questions in it. The complete chapter contained almost 33 verses, and that those 33 can be divided in 3 questions, 3 sections. So the first section is from the first verse of this chapter is like a continuation of the narration that was being done by Shri Vyasdev. Then the verse number 2 till verse number 13, the various questions, the 6 sub questions that Shaunak Rishi asks, that are mentioned over there. Okay, and we will see what those questions are. Then from verse number 14 till verse number 25, Suta starts giving a background about Vyasdev himself. And he also gives background for from verses 26 to 33 as to why he was feeling unhappy, unsatisfied, despite doing all the great work that he has done, as was mentioned in verses 14 to 25. So verses 14 to 25 talk about the contribution of Vyasdev to the great literary work that we have in Sanatana Dharma. So it was one Veda previously, that was when Brahma understood from Vishnu, and then he explained it to Narad Muni that way. Then that one Veda was taken by Vyasdev and broken into 4 Vedas. Then because these Vedas were very big and not so simple to understand, they were further divided into 108 Upanishads. In addition to that, the Puranas were written. So the prior to writing Bhagavad Puran, 17 other Puranas were written. Okay. And I'm not sure whether we spoke about this, but these Puranas are also divided in 3 sections. 6 Puranas are for people who are in Sattva Gun. 6 Purans are for the people who are in Rajogun, and 6 for people in Tamogun. So the 6 for Rajoguni and 6 for Tamoguni plus 5 for Sattva-guni were already written. So this Bhagavatam Puran, which was yet to be written, is actually the 6th Puran in Sattva-gun. But looking at the content, it is actually beyond even Sattva Gun also. So that way, all these 18 Puranas were, or 17 were compiled so far. And Mahabharat was also compiled, which is specifically appreciated by Narad Muni in the 5th chapter. And after doing all of this, despite that, he was feeling unsatisfied. So that verse number 14 to 25, they act as a background to highlight that a person of such a nature, such huge level of contribution he has done, despite that he was feeling unsatisfied. And he started contemplating about what could be the reason for this dissatisfaction. A thought does come to his mind during these last few verses from 26 to 33, but he is not sure about it. So that's why he poses a question to Narad Muni, who appears at the end of the 4th chapter. And after respecting him and honoring him appropriately, then at the start of the 5th chapter, Vyasdev starts asking his doubt, his question to Narad Muni, which we will see today. The the key points that we need to understand are what are those questions that Shaunak Rishi asked, the sub questions. So first one is what he speaks in number 3. Let me share this thing 1 moment.
Sachin, you told that 16 Puranas, right?
17.
17. The Bhagavatam is the 17th, huh?
The 18th one.
18th.
Yeah, because this happened prior to Bhagavatam being spoken by Narad Muni to Vyasdev.
So the 17 Puranas includes Gita also? Gita.
No, Gita is part of Mahabharata. The 17 Puranas, Kali Puran, Vishnu Puran, Devi Puran, Bruhan Naradiya Puran, various Kurma Puran, various Puranas are there.
So Vedas and all won't be considered as Purans.
No, Vedas are separate. So we have 2 branches, Shruti and Smruti. So Vedas are part of Shruti.
Okay.
And Smruti, Puranas, if I am not wrong, Puranas are part of Smruti.
But in Puranas also we cover the subject area of the Vedas, right?
Okay, so how it has happened?
Like in Bhagavad Gita also.
Yeah. Sorry, please continue.
No. Like in Puranas also we are talking about the Vedas, not directly but indirectly, right?
Yeah, indirectly meaning the Puranas have been written kind of in a simplified form to give the same message that is there in Vedas. So now Vedas may have certain information being theoretically represented. So Puranas will have an example of the implementation of the teaching of that example, of the theory. So for example, the love for God with respect to offering food to him before you eat must be explained theoretically in Vedas, but with various examples in Puranas we understand how the saintly people previously offered the food to the Lord. What did they benefit by offering? Whoever did not offer, why did they not offer? What was the drawback of that? These things would have been elaborated. So we can look at it from this way, that we have a book of theology, and that theology, when it is put into practice, it comes out with examples. Yeah, the life examples of saintly people. So now this book which documents all these examples, we can call that as Puran, and the book which documents the theology will be the Vedas. That way. So yeah, the verse number 3, right? So the first is okay. So the first question is about Bhagavatam, when and where and why it was recited. So this question is actually answered from from almost the immediate next verse, that is the chapter 4 itself, verse number 14, when Sutta Goswami starts speaking, until the end of the first canto. So the first canto contains 19 chapters. So from chapter number 4 till the 19th chapter, the complete background of Srimad Bhagavatam recitation is given here. So what happens after Narad Muni talks about his story, then Vyasdev starts compiling Bhagavatam, understanding it, and then how Lord Krishna decides to depart Hastinapur, because of which, after which he was anyway going to depart from this material world altogether. Then what about Kunti trying to stop him, Yudhishthir trying to stop him, then he further stops, because of which Kali Yuga, the effect of Kali Yuga is further delayed because Lord Krishna is there. Then once when Lord Krishna departs, then Parikshit Maharaj, how does he administer the whole kingdom? What happens to Ashwathama? All these which are actually related with Parikshit becoming the king, and after that Parikshit administering the whole kingdom, and how Kali enters, and how, what is the dialogue that happens between Parikshit Maharaj and Kali, and what meaning incentives or not incentives, what leniency, little leniency showed to Kali. All this that transpires to Parikshit Maharaj getting a curse from that Brahman and all that. So the complete history of Bhagavatam prior to it was being spoken is mentioned over there, how Shukadev Goswami enters. So this happens until the end of the first canto, the 19th chapter. Then the next question asked was about Shukadev Goswami's father, that is Vyasdev. Where did he get the inspiration to compile Bhagavatam? And that question is answered in immediately the chapter 5 and chapter 6. Then the next question is about Shukadev Goswami himself. So meaning he was a born knowledgeable person. So he did not care about the gender discrimination, the bodily aspect he had already transcended. So the question about him was, despite wandering like a naked madman, how was he recognized as a great sage by other people? So that question is answered at the end of the 19th chapter in the first canto itself. Then how did Parikshit Maharaj meet Shukadev Goswami? That is also answered in 19th chapter. Why did Parikshit Maharaj fast until death on the rivers of, on the banks of river Ganga? That is answered in the, again, I think 19th chapter itself. There also, yeah, correct, 19th chapter. And Parikshit Maharaj, why did he give up his body? So that is also answered subsequently. So this was about the background for chapter 4. We can start with chapter 5. Anybody has any questions before we move on?
Prabhu, one or two questions.
Yeah.
In 1.4.3, there is a word used, Krishna Dvapan. What exactly it means?
That is Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, which is another name or a kind of a honorary addressing towards Vyasadev. Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa.
Okay, it is Dvapayan.
Yeah.
And in the fourth verse, the word used is monist. Is it Brahmavadi or impersonalist?
So monism think that the God is formless. God does not have a form. Yeah. And on top of that one, they think that finally everything will merge into the Lord.
So it will be impersonalist, you mean to say?
Impersonalism plus some sort of Brahmavadi, you say, meaning Brahman is basically all in all. That is what they think. So Shukadev Goswami was of similar thought process previously, but after he studied Bhagavatam from Vyasadev, he completely changed and he realized the personal form of the Lord is more superior than the impersonal form.
And one last question. You told about 4 sannyasis. So one was Kutichakra,
Utichak, barabar. Correct.
and another was, second was Bahuda.
Bahudhak.
Bahuda.
Then the next verse is Parivrajakaacharya.
That is coming. And
the
last for Paramhans.
Paramhamsa, that's correct. So these are the 4 stages of sannyas ashram.
So these are stages. So the
Yeah.
first person, initially he will be called as a Kutichakra.
Yeah. So Kutichak is basically that person who stays in the same village but outside the family. We say stays in the same village as his family, but not with the family. So he is actually dependent upon the family providing his bodily necessities like food or clothing or something like that. But he is still not saying. This is just a kind of a gradual mechanism to develop a renunciation. That way.
In the second stage, he is outside house, but food from outside also. That is the
He is outside the village. The first stage is outside the house.
Achha, second is outside village.
Yeah.
And sir, what is Parivajak? That
Parivrajakaacharya is not basically situated in one particular village. He continuously roams around. Will keep preaching to various people.
okay.
Paramahamsa has reached the highest level stage, who has understood and has been regularly practicing the spiritual teachings with proper mentality, proper devotion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. So let's move on to chapter 5. Suta uvacha athatam sukhamasina upasinam bruhachrava devarshihi praha viprarshim vinapani smayanniva. Suta Goswami said, thus the sage amongst gods, Narad. So Narad Muni is called as Devarshi. In 10th chapter, I think 25th verse, Krishna says, Devarshinam Naradaha, Maharshinam Bhruguraha, Devarshinam cha Naradaha. So he considers Narad as the best among all Devarshis. Thus the sage amongst the gods, Narad, comfortably seated and apparently smiling, very important point to be noted, apparently smiling, addressed the Rishi amongst the Brahmanas, that is Vedavyas. Okay, purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Narad was smiling because he well knew the great sage Vedavyas and the cause of his disappointment. As he will explain gradually, Vyasadeva's disappointment was due to insufficiency in presenting the science of devotional service. Very, very important point here. Narad knew the defect and it was confirmed by the position of Vyasadeva. So what we actually understand from the whole episode here is that anything and everything which is related with the Lord has a value, and anything and everything which is not related with the Lord has no value. And that we will see when Narad Muni starts speaking in the verse number 14 and 15. And now Narad, this is the first verse where Narad Muni starts speaking in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, and you will see over a period of all the 18 cantos when we study, this is one personality, Narad Muni, when he speaks in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no if and but anywhere. There is no option being given that it is okay if you do this, but if you can't do this, but then you can do this, do something else. There is nothing like that. This is an absolute, the statements of Narad Muni are absolute in terms of devotional service. Like meaning whenever his verses are spoken, you will see that the topmost stage of devotional service is always preached. Just because you are at a lower level doesn't mean he will speak at the lower level for you to rise up. He will always give the path to us which leads us to the topmost stage in devotional service. And we will see when he speaks to various people, Prachina Parhi, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, the Prachetas, and so many people he speaks to, and it is absolute fantastic. It's a spiritual treat to hear or read and understand from what Narad Muni speaks. Verse number 2, Narad Uvacha Parasharya Mahabhaga Bhavatah Kachidatmana Paritushyati Sharira Atma Manasa Evava. Translation. Addressing Vyasdev, the son of Parashar, Narad inquired, are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization? See, now here also, you see, he does not, at least not in Bhagavatam, at least it is mentioned, the conversation does not start, how are you, how is your health, are you doing well, nothing like that. The crux of the discussion is Vyasdev is unhappy, and that unhappiness, the reason for that is to be addressed. All others are unnecessary to be discussed. What needs to be discussed is devotional service. Coming directly to the point. Okay, so some of the purports we will skip today, some we will read. This was a purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. This was a hint by Narad to Vyasdev regarding the cause of his despondency. Vyasdev, as the descendant of Parashar, a greatly powerful sage, had the privilege of having a great parentage, which should not have given Vyasdev cause for despondency. So I hope you remember in Bhagavad Gita also, when Krishna and Arjun address each other, they used to address each other by various names, and depending on the context of the verse, the respective name was used up, right? So at the time when Krishna had not started speaking himself as Bhagwan, as in the role of a Bhagwan, but was speaking as a friend of Krishna, Arjun. That was verse number 2 and 3 of chapter 2. That time he asked, where are these impurities come on you? And you should be fighting, you are a Kshatriya. So immediately when Arjun replies, he uses the word Varshneya for him, for Krishna. It's to convey that you are a descendant of Vrishni, who and everybody is alive there. And here you are asking me to kill everybody who are my ancestors and my relatives. Yeah. So the addressing of each other by various names has their own underlying meaning also. So you would have seen here Parasharya is addressed to Vyasdev. So Parashar Muni's son is Parasharya, which is Vyasdev. So to highlight to him that you are the son of such a great personality, but still you are feeling disappointed, that is actually a shame. And he also, okay, we'll read this one. Being a great son of a great father, he should not have identified the self with the body or the mind. Ordinary men with a poor fund of knowledge can identify the body as self or the mind as self. People like you and me, if we do it, it probably still is understandable, but not a person like Vyasdev, who is the son of Parashar Muni. So from birth or even before the birth itself, the knowledge starts flowing into the children. But Vyasdev should not have done so. One cannot be cheerful by nature unless one is factually seated in self-realization which is transcendental to the material body and mind. So we understand, right? This body is a gross body. We take it over as we enter into this world. And we also have a subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego, which carries with us from one body to another. But when the soul is ready to leave the material world, he drops off the mind, intelligence, and false ego. So the pure soul transcends the material world and goes into the spiritual world. So which confirms that body as well as the mind are material in nature. And because they are material in nature, they cannot be the object of self-realization. So that is why Narad Muni starts off with this point that are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as the objects of self-realization? Meaning he should not have been satisfied by doing so, which is the correct state which he was in, but he was unable to identify what was the cause of his despondency. So Narad Muni starts chastising him. So how are we taught in our professional life? When it comes to giving feedback to somebody, we are supposed to give that in a sandwich mode. Yeah, that sandwich mode is speak positive, then speak the area of improvement, and then again speak positive. Here, Narad Muni does not speak anything which unnecessarily shows whatever he has done, whatever Vyasdeva has done in a positive light. His objective is to correct him, not to unnecessarily diplomatically appreciate him. And we will see how Vyasdev reacts also, the maturity that he displays. Verse number 3, Jigyasitam susampannam apite mahadbhutam krutavan bharatam yastvam sarvartha paribrahmitam. Translation: your inquiries were full and your studies were also fulfilled, well fulfilled. And there is no doubt that you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahabharata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences elaborately explained. The despondency of Vyasdev was certainly not due to his lack of sufficient knowledge, but because as a student, he had fully inquired about the Vedic literatures, as a result of which Mahabharata is compiled with the full explanation of the Vedas. So we are slowly reaching to the point that Narad Muni will speak about. Verse number 4, Jigyasitam adhitam cha brahma yattat sanatanam tathapi shochasyatmanam akrutartha iva prabho. You have fully delineated the subject of impersonal Brahman as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu? So Prabhu means basically master, but Prabhu is addressed here, although a guru never calls the disciple as master, but here it was a kind of a address with respect given for the work that he has done, especially the Mahabharata. The Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra compiled by Sri Vyasdev is the full deliberation of the impersonal absolute feature, and it is accepted as the most exalted philosophical exposition in the world. It covers the subject of eternity and the methods are scholarly. So there cannot be any doubt about the transcendental scholarship of Vyasdev. So why should he lament? Now, what do we understand from all this? Anybody, any point you would like to talk about? Why do you think Narad Muni has talked about, if not all, but some of his works here? The previous few of the works that Vyasdev had done was already spoken by Suta Goswami in the previous chapter, the 4th chapter. But some of these are still spoken by Narad Muni here. Any guesses here? What is the reason?
Just to make people understand that it is a vast subject or something.
And what is the further point that is being conveyed by being a vast subject?
Prabhu, I think this Vyasdev in all his earlier creations has not gone beyond impersonal Brahman.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and what does that mean? What does that signify?
That signifies that he has to, the ultimate aim is to reach to Bhagwan.
Yes, correct.
He has commented on all Brahman as well as Paramatma, but he has not commented in any of his earlier literature about Bhagwan.
Correct. So that key point, I'm trying to find out what does the key point come out basically, that one will not become satisfied at a transcendental level or at a absolute level. One will never become satisfied by understanding these subject matters, even if they're a complete understanding. So this means that, like, say for example, people become very happy when they see the Mahabharat serial by B.R. Chopra, or when they read about Mahabharat, or when they discuss about the various incidents of Mahabharat. Yeah, they might even say that Krishna spoke Gita in Mahabharat, and they might even recite few verses of Bhagavad Gita, although they may not understand them. But the point that that comes out very well in these two verses is that level of knowledge that one can gather by understanding this Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra is not as same as the level that one can understand by one can get to by understanding the Bhagwan aspect. And this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita also, right? Bhaktyamam abhijanati, Krishna says. By understanding Brahman, one cannot understand Krishna, one cannot understand the Bhagwan. But here, by speaking these points, forget we who learn from what Vyasdev has written, but the author Vyasdev himself is unsatisfied despite compiling Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra or Mahabharata, because it still does not touch the crux of devotional service. So Vyasadeva starts speaking now. Vyasa uvacha astyeva me sarvamidam tvayoktam tathapi natma paritushyate me tanmulam avyaktam agadha bodham pruchhamahe tvatma bhavatma bhutam. Translation: Shri Vyasadeva said, all you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction. For you are a man of unlimited knowledge due to your being the offspring of one, Brahmaji, who is self-born without mundane father and mother. So this is actually the right way of obtaining knowledge. Firstly, we have to understand that we are spiritually incomplete. The only way we can become complete is based on the guidance and the blessings and the mercy of Guru and Krishna. Once we admit that we are incomplete, then we have to seek the cause of our incompleteness and the solution as well to becoming complete. And this is precisely what Arjun did in Bhagavad Gita, and precisely what is being done by Vyasadeva also here. So Arjun initially talked about his situation in the first chapter. Then he realized, yeah, Nachaitad vidmaha kataranno gariyo yadva jayema yadi vano jayeyuhu. 2.6 Krishna Arjun says, yadva jayema yadi vano jayeyu. Meaning, is it right for me to fight and lose in the war, which means they will win the war, Or is it right for me to fight and win the war? What is right for me? What is not right for me? I am not able to understand. Please guide me. Because of, and after this, immediately he says, Karpanya dosho pahata swabhavah pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. Yachreyasam nishitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadhi mam tvam prapannam. Shishyasteham, I surrender unto you as a disciple. Please accept me. Okay, and please drive away my doubts. This is the right way of approaching a guru. So the guru, we cannot approach the guru with saying, okay, I have a problem. I want a solution. This is my problem. And I think this is the solution. Just please confirm yes or no. That today people, many jokes and many even incidents also come out that people reach to the doctors where they themselves have done the complete diagnosis. They have also identified from Google what is the solution, and they just want to go to the doctor, and doctor should put a stamp mark, yes, you are right, and then they will go back. This is not how it works in spiritual world. You may have been able to diagnose your problem, which is fine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the problem. I one day approached my Guru Maharaj and told him that I am facing so and so problem. So my Guru told me, this is not your actual problem. And he told me what my actual problem is. And that is when my eyes were opened. This was around a year or so back, 6 months or a year or so back. That is when my eyes opened. So when we develop our own understanding and we consider that my understanding is correct and we go to the Guru for Guru to do some rubber stamping, then that is not the right way. So Guru has the authority to chastise us and to teach us what exactly is the problem and what exactly is the solution. Then as a regular patient, our only duty should be to take the medicine that the doctor has prescribed, to just apply the instruction of the Guru and just walk with it. Spiritual success will be guaranteed. So here also, initially, if you see, Vyasdev was nicely being criticized by Narad Muni. But not just because it was Narad Muni, but it was because Vyasdev had reached a very high level of maturity in terms of knowledge. That is the reason Vyasdev could take that criticism. If our manager were to criticize us for the work that we have done in our office, our ego will spring up and we will not be able to accept the criticism, and we can say few things here and there, right? Why? Because we have not reached that level of maturity that we can accept the criticism. But Vyasdev, despite being so extraordinary in terms of the quality and quantity of work that he had done, and despite that being criticized by Narad Muni, see how he is submitting himself to Narad Muni, to saying that all what you have said about me is perfectly correct. It does not argue even a single word. He says, no, but because of this, and that is why this has happened, and that you do not know the complete situation. Nothing like that. My Guru, he cannot be wrong. I am completely wrong. He is perfectly correct. And surrendering means that taking each and every instruction of the Guru in the best possible manner, without absolute any argument, and with complete surrender. So this is why, meaning, I personally like this conversation between Vyasdev and Narad Muni, because it shows a real high level of maturity of discussion. No nonsense talk by Narad Muni, and no arguments, no justification, and complete acceptance of the instruction of Narad Muni by Vyasdev. Absolute a kind of, a perfect example of how a conversation about spiritual topic should happen. We'll read the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. In the material world, everyone is engrossed with the idea of identifying the body or the mind with the self. As such, all knowledge disseminated in the material world is related either with the body or with the mind. And that is the root cause of all despondencies. So in one single statement, Prabhupada has given the complete explanation, right? Anything and everything that we come across in the material world relates with either the body or with the mind. And that is so true. And that is the reason, that is the root cause of all kind of despondencies. This is not always detected, even though one may be the greatest erudite scholar in materialistic knowledge. It is good, therefore, to approach a personality like Narad to solve the root cause of all despondencies. Why Narad should be approached is explained below. Savai Bhavan Veda Samasta Guhyam Upasito Yat Purushah Puranaha Paravaresho Manasaiva Vishwam Srujatyavattyati Gunairasangaha. Translation: My Lord, everything that is mysterious is known to you, because you worship the creator and destroyer of the material world and the maintainer of the spiritual world, the original personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. This is the crux of the parampara. A man who, purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. A man who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord is the emblem of all knowledge. Such a devotee of the Lord in full perfection of devotional service is also perfect by the qualification of the personality of Godhead. As such, the eightfold perfections of mystic power, Ashta Siddhi, constitute very little of his godly opulence. A devotee like Narad can act wonderfully by his spiritual perfection, which every individual is trying to attain. Srila Narad is a 100% perfect living being, although not equal to the personality of Godhead. So no devotee claims himself to either be a god or equal to the god. Yeah? Every pure devotee will call himself as a servant of the Lord. And when one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, he automatically becomes a reservoir of knowledge, because he has understood and practiced the science of devotional service, which is the crux of each and every knowledge. So again in 10th chapter Bhagavad Gita, in one of the verses he says, Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam. So of all the knowledges available, the spiritual knowledge is the best of all knowledges. And that is the reason we would have seen, in the 6th chapter, the various siddhis are mentioned, the Ashta Siddhi. Yeah. And all these siddhis are actually beneficial only from the body and mind perspective. They don't necessarily help you become a pure devotee of the Lord. That is why Dhyan Yoga was actually rejected by Arjun in verses 36 and 37 in the 6th chapter. Tvam paryatan arka iva trilokim antascharo vayur ivatma sakshi paravare brahmani dharmato vrataihi sanatasya me nyunamulam vichakshva. Like the translation, like the sun, your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds, and like the air, you can penetrate the internal region of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive super soul. Please therefore find out the deficiency in me, despite my being absorbed in transcendence until under disciplinary regulations and vows. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Transcendental realization, pious activities, worshipping the deities, charity, mercifulness, non-violence, and studying the scriptures under strict disciplinary regulations are always helpful. And we'll discuss about it why. So what happens is, when it comes to the pure devotional service, it is generally regarded as unbounded, meaning there is no restriction in how I want to love Krishna. There is no restriction. Krishna reciprocates in whichever manner I love him, if it is pure in nature. So if bhakti is to be unbounded, then why should the path of bhakti be bounded? So meaning basically once you reach the pinnacle of devotional service, then anything and everything you are allowed to do because you are doing it with a pure mind. But while we reach to that, everything and anything and everything that we do is has some restrictions. You can do this, you cannot do that, right? So the reason for that is because all of these are actually helping us do something and avoid something, because there is a chance of committing a mistake while walking on the path, and to avoid that mistake from forcing us to fall down, that is why these guardrails are there. So these guardrails are basically ensuring that we can continue to walk without having a danger of slipping away from the path. And that is why all of these factors, they become important. Pious activities, worshipping the deities, charity, mercifulness, and all that, they help one become better and better devotee, avoid the incorrect path, and continue walking on the right path. Any questions so far?
No.
Any meaning, special meaning of the strict disciplinary regulations?
They basically waking up at a Brahma Muhurta time, doing all this. So regulations are basically trying to perform all our daily activities, obviously oriented toward devotional service, those daily activities at the right time, without giving consideration to how tired and how bored we are. We need to continue performing. Those are disciplinary regulations. Rakesh Prabhuji, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sir. Earlier you mentioned all the issues in this world is because of mind and body, but mind, body, soul, and false ego being distinct, isn't false ego also a big issue as to why the issues happen in this world?
Yes, you are right. So that is actually the effect of the cause. So the point here that Prabhupada is mentioning is, I think this was right. Yeah. So the knowledge aspect is being talked about here. So any and every knowledge or source of knowledge that we have, which is a material knowledge, is oriented towards the body and the mind. So either it tries to give some satisfaction to the body or some satisfaction to the mind. And when the body or the mind is unsatisfied, then our false ego comes into picture. So the false ego becomes the effect of the cause of the knowledge which is oriented around the body and mind.
Okay.
Okay, so verse number 8, Shri Narada Uvacha Bhavatanu Prayam Yasho Bhagavato Amalam Yenai Vaso Natushyeta Manye Taddarshanam Khilam. Translation, Shri Narad said, you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless. So now Narad Muni has criticized anything and everything that Lord or Vyasdev has done in just one single word: worthless. So this now can give a good understanding to us of what knowledge we try to gather and whether it has any worth or not. So if we divide the knowledge in three categories, the first category is the materialistic knowledge that today we gather. The second category is the religious knowledge about dharma, artha, and kama, and even moksha. And the third category of knowledge is about bhakti, about Bhagavan. So what he is saying is, let alone the materialistic knowledge, he is anyway not talking about that. He is saying that any and every knowledge which is not Bhagavan or bhakti related is worthless. So we can understand today whatever we are doing, what is the worth of that knowledge? It's a very strong statement, but that is the truth. So if we adulterate the truth to add some diplomacy or some false statement in that, then the message may get diluted and we may not be able to get or give the message properly. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The eternal relation of an individual soul with the Supreme Soul, personality of Godhead, is constitutionally one of being the eternal servitor of the eternal master. Okay. So what this means? Jivera Swarupahaya Nityara Krishna Das means the nature of the soul is that it is an eternal servant of Lord Krishna, which is what this thing, eternal relation of the soul with the Supreme Soul is one is the eternal servitor, that is, we are the eternal servitor of the eternal master. The Lord has expanded himself as living beings in order to accept loving service from them. So he comes within us, right? And he plays with us, or he plays or he displays various leelas and pastimes while he is on earth. And this he does only for our spiritual upliftment. And this alone can satisfy both the Lord and the living beings. Such a scholar as Vasudev has completed many expansions of the Vedic literatures, ending with the Vedanta philosophy. But none of them have been written directly glorifying the personality of Godhead. There are dry philosophical speculations, even on the transcendental subject of the Absolute, have very little attraction without directly dealing with the glorification of the Lord. The personality of Godhead is the last word in transcendental realization. The Absolute realized as impersonal Brahman or localized soul Paramatma is less productive of transcendental bliss than the supreme personal realization of his glories. What all this means, let's look one point at a time. Yeah. So what he is saying, we understood this one. Lord has expanded himself as living beings, right? So we talked about it. So he comes within us, one among us, to perform pastimes, to give philosophy, to perform kind of transcendental loving relationship, and that gives us spiritual knowledge, bhakti towards him, and uplifts us spiritually. So now a bit of background of Vasudev is talking about. Yeah. So what has he done? He has written expansions of Vedic literature. So we talked about it. One Veda was expanded into 4 Vedas. 4 Vedas were expanded into 108 Upanishads. Right? All of this, and he ended with the Vedanta Sutra, the conclusion of Vedanta philosophy as Vedanta. But what Prabhupada says here, but none of them have directly glorified the Supreme Lord. So dry philosophical speculations, yeah, at material level, so it is anyway useless, but even on the transcendental subject of the Absolute have very little attraction because it does not glorify the Lord. So there is no absolute benefit of these philosophical writings because it still does not touch the crux of the subject, which is the Lord himself. And the personality of the Godhead is the last word in transcendental realization, which means that if we understand 99 out of 100 subjects but have not understood the personality of Godhead, Bhagwan himself, then that 99 has of no value. But if we understand just the one subject of the Lord, about the Lord, that will help us understand anything and everything. So we saw in the first chapter, second chapter, first canto, there is one verse which talks about the 3 stages of the knowledge. Realize, yeah? So the first level is Brahman. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagwaniti, Shabdyate. The Brahman, that is the impersonal form of the Lord, is the Brahman. That is the primitive stage of gathering spiritual knowledge. Then the next level stage is the Paramatma, the super soul in our heart, the Paramatma. That level of knowledge, when we get, it comes to the second level. And the third level, which is the last, the final level, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord, Bhagwan. Yeah. So Prabhupada is saying here that if you understand the Brahman or the Paramatma, that will not be as productive as obtaining the transcendental bliss from the Supreme Person. So this is the meaning of the purport. So now this comes to the main point. We are comparing us with Vyasdev. The compiler of Vedanta Darshan is Vyasdev himself. Yet he is troubled, although he is the author. Okay. Now, so what sort of transcendental bliss can be derived by the readers and listeners of Vedanta, which is not explained directly by Vyasdev? So people who consider that Vedanta is very important to be understood, they are still missing the key point that Bhagwan stands above all of this. So a person who does not understand Vedanta but has become a very advanced level devotee is far more superior than a person who has become a big scholar in Vedanta. Herein arises the necessity of explaining Vedanta Sutra in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam by the same author. There was one person, so this was during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, and that person's guru had asked him to read Bhagavad Gita, understand it. And this person was holding the Bhagavad Gita upside down and he was trying to read it. So one day Mahaprabhu was passing through that area and he saw this person and he realized that he is holding the book upside down. And so Mahaprabhu asked him, meaning, why are you crying? Okay, this person was crying a lot, meaning tears were flowing rapidly from his eyes. So Mahaprabhu asked him as to why are you crying? He is saying, my guru has told me to read Bhagavad Gita, but I do not understand anything because I cannot read and write. So then when he's saying, so that's why I feel like crying because I am not able to fulfill the instruction of my guru. And Mahaprabhu then says that you do not need to read it because you have already understood the proper meaning. He says that if you are following the instruction of your guru who has understood the instruction properly, that means you are a complete perfect devotee. You do not need to do anything else. So this was the importance given not just to Guru's instruction, but about being a devotee and not a scholar. Yatha dharmadayashchartha munivaryanu na tatha vasudevasya mahima yanu varnitaha. Although great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles, beginning with religious performances. You have not described the glories of Supreme Personality Vasudeva. So now he comes to the main reason. Can somebody read this?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes.
The prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared. The root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. Yes, certainly, as a matter of course, given descriptions of the glories of the Lord Sri Krishna, but not as many as given to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. These four items are by far inferior to engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Sri Vyasadeva, as the authorized scholar, knew very well this difference And still, instead of giving more importance to the better type of engagement, namely devotional service to the Lord, he had more or less improperly used his valuable time, and thus he was despondent. From this, it is clearly indicated that no one can be pleased substantially without being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is clearly mentioned. After liberation, which is the last item in the line of performing religiosity, etc., one is engaged in pure devotional service. This is called the stage of self-realization, or the Brahma Buddha stage. After attainment of this Brahma Buddha stage, one is satisfied. But satisfaction is the beginning of transcendental bliss. One should progress by attaining neutrality and equality in the relative world. And passing the stage of equanimity, one is fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the instruction of the personality of Godhead in the Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion is that in order to maintain the status quo of the Brahma Buddha stage, as also to increase the degree of transcendental realization, Narada recommended to Vyasadeva that means Vyasadeva should now eagerly and repeatedly describe the path of devotional service. This will cure him gross despondency.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. So Prabhupada is writing on the similar lines. So one key point that comes out here is this one: the religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation are inferior compared to the devotional service. So you might have heard many times that the society talks about the four pillars of dharma: artha, kama, and moksha, right? So dharma and moksha are good. Yeah. Following dharma is obviously required so that one remains within the boundaries also and does not go into the world of sinful activities. But to consider that the body has been given to us to obtain artha and kama is actually a incorrect usage of the body. What Narad Muni is stating here is that we have to utilize the body for the purpose it has been given, which means the bhakti, performing of bhakti is the only activity of the body or the soul performed via the body. So when we are utilizing this body for something else also, it is actually a misuse of the body. And that's why Prabhupada says here that it is inferior. So the whole world, the material world, has been created by the Lord for us to enjoy, fulfill our desires, be satisfied, and then come back to the actual path of the devotional service. What Narad Muni states here is, do not go on to that path altogether of sense enjoyment, because there is a probability that you may not want to come back to the path of devotional service. And this is practically what we see in the society also, right? People are so much engrossed in demigod worship that if we tell them that Krishna is the Supreme Lord and you need to perform bhakti and you should not ask for anything from him and just perform his bhakti selflessly, they will say it is not possible, we can't do that. Because they are so much used to asking, giving something to the demigods and asking something in return from the demigods, that stage of selfless devotional service does not come at all to them. And that is why it is misunderstood that the Lord is an order supplier. So you order and he supplies you your provision. It is an incorrect understanding. So, and that is what meaning, if you cannot remain satisfied even by performing pious activities or reading about Brahman also, how can somebody remain satisfied by performing material activities?
Prabhu, after this second paragraph, after liberation, which is the last item in the line of performing religiosity, one is engaged in pure devotional service. What exactly it means?
Okay, so moksha, meaning we will reach to this in Bhagavad Gita. It starts from 18.54, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma stage. So Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati. So what it means basically is, in this material world, performing pure devotional service is not so simple, right? So for that, one should reach to the level of Brahma Bhuta stage, which means he has reached the moksha level aspect, from which the actual devotional service can be performed. That is this one. And that starts giving us the required satisfaction. So today, whatever we think we are doing pure devotional service is a kind of a shadow of pure devotional service. The actual devotional service will start from the point when one receives moksha. But this is a kind of a difficult concept to understand, and it generally we avoid discussing this point. Otherwise it might discourage somebody to say, okay, yeah, anyway, this is not pure devotional service and I can do only after moksha. So let me strive for moksha. And then I will think about devotional service. So that is not what is recommended. You focus on bhakti and bhakti alone. Moksha is a byproduct of bhakti. So if you try to achieve bhakti, moksha is easily achievable. But if you try to achieve moksha, it's not necessary you will get bhakti. So that is why Prabhupada constantly maintains bhakti is what you should do. Okay, so let us move.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay, now these two verses are very important, very hard-hitting verses these are, but we need to accept it. Nayadvachas chitrapadam hare yasho jagat pavitram pragrunita karhichit tadvayasam tirtham ushanti manasa nayatra hamsa niramantu shikshayah. Translation: those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. Okay. Now, Prabhupada has mentioned these two birds here, crows and swans. So we will look at why these two birds have been mentioned here, and trying to understand from their characteristics, we will understand the literature in the of the material world and literature of the spiritual devotional service. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Crows and swans are not birds of the same feather because of their different mental attitudes. Yeah. So why? Because you will see the crows generally thrive on garbage, whereas the swans like to drink milk. The fruity workers or passionate men are compared to the crows. Sorry. Whereas the all perfect saintly persons are compared to the swans. The crows take pleasure in a place where garbage is thrown out, just as the passionate fruity workers take pleasure in wine and woman and presses for gross sense pleasure. The swans do not take pleasure in those places where crows are assembled for conferences and meetings. So when you see a lot of crows hanging around together, you would not see a bird like swan over there. And where swans are present, you will not see crows over there. They are instead seen in the atmosphere of natural scenic beauty, where there are transparent reservoirs of water, nicely decorated with stems of lotus flowers in variegated colors of natural beauty. That is the difference between the classes of two birds. So here, the difference between the crow and the swan is mentioned, and how it relates to a devotee and a materialistic person is also explained. Yeah? So the crows are those which take pleasure in garbage. Swans are those which take pleasure in the natural scenic beauty and a good quality water. So basically anything and everything which is very beautiful, very good. Whereas crows take pleasure, whereas materialistic men take pleasure in wine, woman kind of activities, the devotees take pleasure in Sankirtan, Katha about Krishna or philosophy, all these activities. So this talks about the differences between crows and swans and materialistic people and the devotees. Now, Prabhupada relates this point with the literature also based on the mentality of the people. So nature has influenced different species of life with different mentalities, and it is not possible to bring them up into the same rank and file. So you cannot satisfy a person who takes pleasure in wine and women related topics and activities. You cannot give that satisfaction to the person via giving him Bhagavatam, because he will not be interested in hearing or listening also. And if you give the materialistic literature to a devotee, he will not be satisfied there. Similarly, there are different kinds of literature for different types of men of different mentality. Mostly the market literatures which attract men of the crows categories are literatures containing refused remnants of sensuous topics. Rao Prabhuji, can you read further, please?
I will read.
Yeah. Okay, Vijay.
Similarly, there are different kinds of literature from different types of men of different mentality. Mostly the market literatures which attract men of the crows categories are literature containing refused remnants of sensuous topics. They are generally known as mundane talks in relation with the gross body and subtle mind. They are full of subject matter described in decorative language, full of mundane similes and metaphorical arrangements. Yet, with all that, they do not glorify the Lord. Such poetry and prose on any subject matter is considered decoration of a dead body. Spiritually advanced men who are compared to the swans do not take pleasure in such dead literatures, which are source of pleasure for men who are spiritually dead. These literatures in the modes of passion and ignorance are distributed under different labels, but they can hardly help the spiritual urge of the human being. And thus, the swan-like spiritually advanced men have nothing to do with them. Such spiritually advanced men are called manasa also because they always keep up the standards of transcendental voluntary services to the Lord on the spiritual plane. This completely forbids fruitive activities for gross bodily sense satisfaction or subtle speculations of the material egoistic mind.
Hare Krishna. Just one moment, Uday Prabhu. Thank you. So what we can see here is Prabhupada is writing about the importance of the literature and the quality of the literature. So when somebody is materially oriented, he will automatically take pleasure in that literature, which is actually only useful to obtain temporary sense pleasure for the body or the mind or the senses. But such literature does not attract the spiritually oriented people, because these people consider that as garbage, and garbage is liked by crows and not by swan-like people, which Prabhupada says that it is manasa. So such spiritually advanced men, these manasas, are those who take pleasure in anything which is related with the Lord. Now, why all this is being talked about by Narad Muni to Vyasdev, and which is further elaborated by Prabhupada. Okay, the point here to be understood is now Narad Muni wants Vyasdev to write something which glorifies the Lord. So Narad Muni is talking about the two categories of literature, one which glorifies the Lord and one which does not glorify the Lord, which can glorify the activities of the body and the mind and the sense pleasure and all that. But it is, or even the Brahman also, but that is not related with the Lord. So what Lord is highlighting here is any literature which does not glorify the Lord is not of any value, is worthless. So now he is highlighting to him the point that because he has to write about the Lord, he is talking about the distinguishing characteristics between these two types of literature, so that he and even others who read this are inclined towards reading, and Vyasdev is inclined towards writing, and we are inclined towards reading such a literature. That is the key point to be understood here, that the two types of literature are being talked only from a comparison perspective to tell us the advantages and drawbacks of reading these two literatures. Yes, Uday Prabhuji, please continue.
Social literary men, scientists, mundane poets, theoretical philosophers, and politicians who are completely absorbed in the material advancement of sense pleasure are all dolls of the material energy. They take pleasure in a place where rejected subject matters are thrown, according to Swami Sridhara. This is the pleasure of the prostitute hunters. But literatures which describe the glories of the Lord are enjoyed by the Paramahamsas who have grasped the essence of human activities.
Jai. Thank you. I think time will permit us for only one particular verse. I thought we will do until 16 today, but we won't be able to. So this particular verse we will do, and then we can take the verse number 12 in the next class. Tadvag visargo janatagha viplavo yasmin prati shlokam abadhavati api namanyanantasya yasho ankitani yat shrunvanti gayanti grunanti sadhavaha. Now again he continues on the point of literature. Yeah. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, pastimes, etc. of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed towards bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. Very two important verses, and in a kind of a conclusive manner, they tell us about the long-term, or I would say the absolute benefits of both these type of literatures. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's a big one. We may not be able to read completely. We'll try to read the key points here. It is a qualification of the great thinkers to pick up the best even from the worst. It is said that intelligent man should pick up nectar from a stalk of poison and should accept gold even from a filthy place, should accept a good and qualified wife even from an obscure family, and should accept a good lesson even from a man or from a teacher who comes from the untouchables. These are some of the ethical instructions for everyone in every place without exception. But a saint is far above the level of an ordinary man. He is always absorbed in glorifying the Supreme Lord because by broadcasting the holy name, fame of the Supreme Lord, the polluted atmosphere of the world will change. And as a result of propagating the transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam, people will become sane in their transactions. So this is actually the point to be understood from the perspective of the benefit of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, at the long-term benefit. So when we talk about Bhagavatam, when we speak about it and we start practicing and we preach it as well to others, the mind and the life of individual people, that gradually improves and moves away from the materialistic mindset to a devotion oriented mindset. So it becomes our prime duty that once we understand Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, it becomes every individual's primary duty to preach the message of both these great literatures to everybody. While preparing this commentation on this particular stanza of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have a crisis before us. Okay. This is a bit of a history. Our neighboring friend has we'll skip that. We have practically no business in the political field, yet we see that previously there were both China and India, and they both lived peacefully for centuries without ill feeling. The reason is that they lived those days in an atmosphere of God consciousness, and every country over the surface of the world was God-fearing, pure-hearted, and simple, and there was no question of political diplomacy. There is no cause of quarrel between the two countries, China and India, over land which is not very suitable for habitation. And certainly there is no cause for fighting on this issue. But due to the age of quarrel, Kali, which we have discussed, there is always a chance of quarrel and slight provocation. And skip this part. Okay. It is the duty of every responsible Indian to broadcast the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the world, to do all the supermost good, as well as to bring about the desired peace in the world. Because India has failed in her duty by neglecting this responsible work, there is so much quarrel and trouble all over the world. Okay. Now, Prabhupada talks about one important point here, which I will come to directly. When there is a fire in a house, the inmates of the house go out to get help from the neighbors, who may be foreigners, and yet without knowing the language, the victims of the fire express themselves, and the neighbors understand the need, even though not expressed in same language. So what it means is, let's say we are in China, we don't know their language, they probably don't know our language. And when there is a fire in our house and we come out on the streets and ask for help by pointing their drawing their attention towards the fire, even if we are not speaking the same language, still they will understand. That is because there is a common kind of aspect or the common subject that is being talked about. They understand fire and we are trying to explain fire. So what Prabhupada is highlighting here is the same spirit of cooperation is needed to broadcast this transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the polluted atmosphere of the Lord. After all, it is a technical science of spiritual values, and thus we are concerned with the techniques and not the language. If the techniques of this great literature are understood by the people of the world, there will be success. So I'll skip the next para here, and we will take next verse, verse number 12 in the next week. Anybody has any question? So in this chapter, Narad Muni will start talking about his own background before he became a proper devotee of the Lord. And we will see that in the next week and next week. Any question, anybody?
So this chapter is a prelude to what is the importance of Srimad Bhagavatam, right?
Yes. So if you remember, one question asked was, where did Vyasadeva get the inspiration to compile Bhagavatam?
Yeah.
This is a kind of a background to that particular answer. So why was Vyasadeva feeling despondent about it? That is being explained. Then what does Narad Muni give him as an instruction? That is explained. And then Vyasadeva takes that instruction, works on it, and he starts compiling Srimad Bhagavatam. So that
But one thing being spoken here, like when they are comparing the what is being categorized as that very, very bad literature. Is it something of what all the previous Puranas, or is it in general about something not which is related to Puranas?
Okay, so there are two categories. I would say there are three categories of literature as we spoke. So the one category of literature is a materialistic literature, which is focusing on trying to obtain sense pleasure in a materialistic manner. So that is obviously being talked about as the garbage. Yeah, so this is clear. Then there are two other categories of literature and one of them is one that satisfies just the body and mind. So dharma, artha, and kama and moksha. These are the principles on which those literatures have been written. And then there is a literature which talks about the glories of the Supreme Lord Himself, like Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam or something like that. So what Narad Muni is saying, he is asking him, are you satisfied by writing or compiling literatures which satisfies only the body and mind? Which is, if you see, we talked about the 17 Puranas. So the 17 Puranas, which have been categorized as 5 until Bhagavatam was written, 5 in the class of Sattvagun, 6 in the class of Rajogun, and 6 in the class of Tamogun. So these all these literatures, even if it is part of the Sattvagun, still they revolve around something to do with the body and mind. And because Bhagavatam is not like that, that's why Bhagavatam is called as Amala Puranam. There is not a single dark or bad spot in Bhagavatam. It is called as a spotless literature. And why spotless? Because it addresses the final authority, the final subject from a bhakti perspective. It does not address anything that satisfies the body or the mind alone. It gives the nourishment only for the soul. Nothing which will give you bodily pleasure, nothing which will give you mental pleasure. It talks purely about bhakti. So in the Devi Puran, please continue.
No, continue. Sorry.
In the Devi Puran, you will see that there are methods prescribed how to satisfy Kali Mata, how to satisfy Durga Mata, or some other Puranas would be written where some action needs to be performed to satisfy certain demigod who will give certain pleasure or certain boon to you or something like that. But all this has a materialistic value. It has a beginning, it has an end. It is not a permanent benefit. It is not at a transcendental level. That is why these literatures are considered to be garbage, because they revolve only around body and mind, and body and mind are part of the material world. They are not part of the spiritual world. So at a certain point of time, when you fulfill your 4 regulative principles like dharma, artha, and kama, moksha, and when you receive moksha, you are anyway going to give up this body and mind and intelligence, false ego. So anyway, that is what is not going to remain permanent with you. What is the point in trying to learn, understand about that knowledge? Because this is not eternal. Eternal is bhakti. And that is where Bhagavatam comes into picture.
So in Bhagavatam, there won't be any kind of talks about anything like Vedic philosophy or anything which we did in Gita.
No, philosophy is there. Philosophy is there, but philosophy is explained via the life of pure devotees. So, when you see like Narad Muni, so his life is mentioned there. What was he before that? What did he do? What did he achieve? How did he become a pure devotee? What did he do after that? So from the life and sketch of a pure devotee, what do we learn out of it is what is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The various incarnations of Krishna or Vishnu are explained over there. So we learn something from it, but that learning is purely at a level of the soul and not at the body and mind.
Thanks.
Prabhuji, I have one question here.
Yes, please, Prabhuji.
Yeah, so see, I've been hearing about this Vedas, that the when we are actually using Vedas, more of Sakam Bhaktis are being introduced here. But when we hear Bhagavad Gita, Krishna clearly says, Vedesha Sarvaira Ahama Vedya. I am to be learned from Veda. I am the knower of Veda. I am the creator of Veda, and from Vedas you have to understand me.
Correct.
So if Vedas are only talking about Sakam Bhakti, how can one understand Bhagavanta from using Vedas?
So Vedas don't talk only about Sakam Bhakti. So Sakam Bhakti forms a major portion of the Vedas. But one study was done, and if it has to be spoken in terms of percentages, around only 4% of the literature in Vedas talk about devotional service. 96% of the literature in Vedas talk about the Sakam Bhakti. So that's why, because it forms such a huge percentage and such a huge size of literature of Vedas, that's why Vedas are spoken or said to be focusing more on that. But that doesn't mean that is the only thing that they're giving. The devotional service aspect is also there, but it's very low, negligible, and hence not talked so much about. That's why Bhagwan is saying that if you read Vedas and if you do not understand me, then you have understood nothing. Meaning the maximum portion is what gets highlighted automatically. That is why generally we think that Vedas is about Sakam Bhakti alone, but it's not alone. There are a few other things also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Hare Krishna. We'll see you
Thanks.
next
Thanks a
week.
lot. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.